You're listening to Side Hustle Pro, the podcast that teaches you to build and grow a side hustle from passion project to profitable business. And I'm your host, Nikayla Matthews. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Side Hustle Pro podcast. Today on the show, we have Stefanie Thomas. Stefanie is the Senior Associate of Investments with Impact America Fund. Since 2013, Stefanie has primarily centered her passions around support for under-resourced entrepreneurs, including co-founding a female-centered entrepreneurship organization called Women Who Launch, and traveling over 6,000 miles by car across the U.S. to work with small businesses, landing her a feature on HLN's Growing America docuseries. While in business school, Stefanie was selected as fund member of a social impact venture fund at the University of Michigan, sourcing opportunities for investment within education technologies. The next year, she would go on to become a co-director with heavy focus on internal development. This experience led Stefanie to eventually pair up with Keisha Cash of Impact America Fund in 2015. In her work with Impact America Fund, Stefanie has emerged as a voice of Black women VCs, according to Fast Company, and works at the intersection of founder diversity, technology for impact, and the deployment of capital within untapped markets. She received her MBA from the Ross School at the University of Michigan and her BS in economics from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Stefanie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nikki, for that great intro.
I know, that was quite a mouthful, and that was the shortened version, y'all. Stefanie is quite accomplished, and we actually go way back. Like, we went to undergrad and also business school together, and I wanted her to be on the show because, I just get so much inspiration from her career journey and her experiences, and I really know that other entrepreneurial women will get that same inspiration and motivation from her. So, Steph, we are going to go all the way in today from, you talking us through your background to your current experiences and what led you to where you are today. So let's get into it.
Yeah, Nikki, every time you and I have a conversation, we always go deep. So I really appreciate having you as, a friend who can really continue to encourage me to do what I do. And just listen to the bio. It's like, who is that? Well, that doesn't even always necessarily sound like myself. It sounds exhausting almost when I think about how I've gotten there. It's definitely been a gradual journey, a step-by-step thing. I have to say that folks like you being in my network and my family, I would call you, has made the difference. So thank you.
We get kind of corny sometimes, and must she excuse us? So yeah, let's go back to where we really met, or even before then. So you are now working as an entrepreneur, and you work alongside a lot of fellow entrepreneurs, especially, as you put it, under-resourced entrepreneurs. So how did that all come about? Did you grow up amongst entrepreneurs? Like, how did you even start to think of that as a career route?
Yeah, I definitely have to say just where I am now, it's very entrepreneurial. Even though I'm in a venture capital capacity, working with Impact America Fund, I work directly with the general founder and partner, Keisha Cash. And it's definitely been an adventure building a fund while also supporting entrepreneurs that we think are individuals that really care about community. And so we want to make sure that we're helping them to get further faster with the capital that we're deploying. So being able to sort of be in this position to help minority entrepreneurs and to actually also experience like an entrepreneurial environment, I have to say really started from my childhood, growing up in a house with a father who was a serial entrepreneur, very much focused on building. He wanted to build something for our family. And he really felt that the best way to go about building wealth for a family is to start something yourself, right? And to aspire to have ownership in your work, and then being able to see the economics or the benefits from the income, right? And so it took me a while to get there, though. I didn't always expect that I would sort of pay homage to my dad for what he'd done. I had to do a lot of self-reflecting as an adult to actually get to that point. But I remember, very vividly as a kid, I would hop in the car with my dad. We'd take a trip to New York. Was born and raised in Washington, D.C. So you're talking, a couple 100-mile drive to one of the fashion capitals of the world. And we would be on Canal Street and on, these in these fashion districts as well, picking up items from merchants. And my father would literally go back to DC and sell these items, as sort of his side hustle while he worked for the city government. And for us, it was, experience in how do we figure out how to, source items that people want that are fashionable and trendy, and then bring them back home to DC. And this was pre-internet, so a lot of people couldn't shop online, really know what was happening, get access to clothing that quickly. So yeah, just those type of stories of my father just thinking of different ways to earn income is something that really gave me that respect about the entrepreneur, and knowing that he was someone who didn't, get a college education, didn't have a formal business education, but still was figuring it out. It took him longer, right? He failed several times before he hit on something that was successful. But at the end of the day, it was about being scrappy. It was about having that will. And so for me, because I was fortunate enough to eventually go get a college degree and get a formal business education, started to think about how could I, leverage that opportunity to be a benefit to folks who remind me of my own father.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you didn't automatically go into or start out being an entrepreneur. Like you mentioned, you did go to college and you did decide to kind of pursue that traditional route of getting your education. Tell us about that. Tell us about why you chose the undergrad that you did and how that experience influenced your current path.
A lot of that started out just through encouragement from my parents about the importance of education, right? Going to school. Again, for them, it was something that was a much bigger challenge, right? To get access to higher education, to be able to afford it. And how they grew up, it was more of a thing of after you graduate high school, you go straight to work, right? You try to figure out, what type of job you want to take on. College wasn't necessarily something that was expected in the household. So when my parents got together, they definitely wanted something different for my brothers and I. And so it was always about education, but it was always about, that higher education that could launch us into professional careers where we could actually, establish ourselves financially, right? And have that security. So we're thinking, corporate America, instead of more of the typical, service-based blue collar jobs that were available locally for folks who didn't have, college degrees. So that was always a foundation. And, again, my father was very much business savvy, even though he didn't have formal business education. And he would nudge, me into thinking more about business. And for me, it was about, at the time, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew having a business education could allow me a bunch of different opportunities. So I always love options and that flexibility around it. And so, whether working for myself or working for someone else, having those fundamentals I thought was critical. And, what other way to go about doing it but to pursue, business education at a world-renowned business school. And the time it was about going to the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania. And my mother would always, I remember she would take me to drop me off at school when I was in high school. And we have these conversations, especially my senior year, about opportunities beyond high school and what those would look like in terms of what schools I wanted to apply to. And so Wharton was a dream. And, my mother encouraged me, definitely if that was what I wanted to pursue, to go after it. This was one of my first lessons around believing in myself. And at the end of the day, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get into that caliber school, but had a support system. Again, it's always been a theme in my life to encourage me and to really see the strengths in me and the potential in me that maybe I didn't see at the time, and to just work hard for it and to go after it. And fortunately, enough, I was accepted into the program, and that's how I sort of got my start in business. But, I have to say there were a lot of learnings for me once I got into the program, where it wasn't necessarily just about learning business fundamentals, the academic piece of it. It was really about learning about who I was as an individual, what I really wanted.
And talk about that because, we were at Penn at the same time. I was in the School of Arts and Sciences and you were in Wharton. And I saw that grind that Wharton is a special place, especially for the undergrads. And I did not envy you that grind. Talk to me about how you adjusted to that and how you got through that, because especially being an African American woman, there weren't a lot of you guys, right? How did you navigate that?
I mean, hey, look, it wasn't a perfect process. It wasn't, it was a definitely up and down journey. I tell people that all the time. I definitely earned my stripes during that time. I just found people who, I could resonate with, people who really, I felt were very similar to me, but also ambitious and had drive and who could be supportive. And, Nikki, it ended up being for us, I think for both of us, actually, the African Rhythms Dance Group, right? Like having stuff outside of the classroom where we could release, right? And have folks that we felt were people we identify with, like an affinity, and being able to rely on those folks even in the hard times. So I think one thing that was very intimidating about being at Wharton is you had phenomenal, impressive students from all over the globe. Some of them had already built and sold companies. Some were being featured in the New York Times, being lead writers on war stories in their countries. And it was just one of those things where I didn't feel adequate. I kind of kept looking around like, do I fit into this place? And I think a student group like performing arts group like African Rhythms, which is the haven, that was for me on campus, really allowed me to also sort of be my full self in that capacity, and have that community of people to support me through those times and through those challenges. So I think, again, for me, throughout my career, throughout my life, it's always been about finding your tribe, finding people that you can resonate with and people who can support you through those ups and downs. Because you're going to have them. It's not always going to be smooth sailing.
Right. And I was just about to say finding your tribe and how important that was. That was really important for my experience as well. I mean, African Rhythms, when I first got to Penn, it was such a culture shock. I really wanted to transfer, actually. I was like, this place, I don't know about this place. And it was because of finding my tribe that I was able to, start to get my sea legs, so to speak, and was able to make it through the experience. Like, don't get me wrong. I just went back for my 10-year, actually, and I look back at the experience now with overall fond memories, but there were definitely ups and downs and challenging times. So kudos to African Rhythms for getting us through that. Yoop, yoop. So then from Penn, you went on to Citigroup, right? You were VP at Citigroup. You managed institutional investor relations. How did you go from Penn to Citigroup? And, what made you decide to take that as your first job out of undergrad?
Wow, Nikki, you making me go back.
Yeah, we have to go back in order to come forward. We have to. It's fun. It's so funny because when I look back, it is one of those things where it's like, oh, did I kind of fall into that? Or were there certain things that really happened that were intentional, right? About how my path ended up being the way it was. And I think it was a little bit of both, but I think, at the same time, for me, I've always been aware of, what I'm good at and playing to my strengths. I haven't always been able to articulate them, right? But I always knew sort of what environments were the best environments for me and most conducive. And I would even do that within sort of a traditional context. It wasn't always about taking the alternative path or always looking for something that's totally different from what everyone else is doing. But it was also, even within those sort of mainstream circles, how can I carve out my own little thing, right? And I think, so you think about Citigroup, I'm coming from the Wharton School, there are tons of kids who are like so competitive, just killing it, right? Just killing it in school.
And, they could get any job they wanted, right? It gets them for some of these top firms to go into more of these traditional professions. And that a lot of that included investment banking and management consulting, right? I chose the banking route, but for me, I knew that absolutely not. I didn't want to go into traditional investment banking, but I did want to learn about the fundamentals about the banking system, how it worked, especially how it tied to supporting companies, right? And so looking at that, and then also was very familiar and interested in just the international business space. And even with my major, I ended up minoring in East Asian studies. So I was very much intrigued by East Asian culture and international trade. So when I looked at Citi, it was sort of like, okay, I'm going into banking, which is very traditional and sort of almost expected for a student coming out of the business school. But what within inside that world is an area that would be really interesting to me, that I could flourish and really get my feet wet in a way that I thought was conducive to my growth. And that was in the International Trade Group at Citi. And they had the biggest and the best, group at the time doing this work. And so, another thing I did is you also had to apply directly through a certain system to get your job. But, instead of just going through the traditional system, right, I wanted to know the people on the other side who were working in this capacity. And so I would do a lot of heavy networking with folks who were decision makers in those groups to say, hey, I'm very interested in this. This is why I'd be a great candidate. And FYI, when you see my resume, know that this is me. And, hopefully you consider me seriously for the opportunity. And so I would take trips to New York from Philadelphia to be in the presence of these people and letting them know how interested I was in this opportunity. So I think that's how I got my start, just really looking at things that were aligned with my interests, but then also things that could set me up in a way that would be conducive for me to perform well, and not necessarily always taking the path that someone had set out for me. But even within more mainstream paths, again, carving out my niche that I knew would work best for me and my needs.
So yeah, we were talking about your role at Citi, and you ended up being at Citigroup for 5 years. So at this point, at any point during that experience, were you like, okay, I'm starting to see, I'm getting these skills, I'm getting this background. Now is the time for me to start doing some entrepreneurial things or start thinking about making that move. Was that in the back of your mind at all?
It wasn't necessarily like, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to start something. It was more organic than that. It was like, I really want to make a difference in communities I care about. And it's great, to have this foundation. You're working with large companies, right? But at the end of the day, you start to feel like a cog in a wheel. It's a big institution, very robust training, which is great. But in terms of, as you move up, being able to make certain decisions on things, that becomes harder and harder to access, right? And people talk about glass ceilings, right? And for me, like looking around, at the end of the day, when I got to a certain point, I wasn't really seeing people who looked like me, who thought like me, who were, African-American females, right? Who were first generation, college grads, and who really brought a different perspective to the table just because of their diverse background. It was literally, being surrounded by older white men most of the time. And so figuring out how to navigate the politics of that, right, became exhausting. It was, I think, necessary to inform like my future experiences that I would have as a professional. But I think at some point, I felt so anxious to break free from that bureaucracy and even from corporate America. And so it was more of like an entrepreneurial fire in me to do something different and start things that I thought, were more important, right? That mattered for me. And so how could I use my skills that I gained in this more corporate capacity to work on initiatives like in community? And so what I started out doing is I didn't just jump out there right away. What I really did is start finding folks within Manhattan, within Brooklyn, New York, who, had a similar identity, similar passion, similar story, and working on nonprofit initiatives. I worked on the launch of an organization that's still running today. It's called Catalyst Network Foundation, where we partnered with high schools in Brooklyn to support those students in their college readiness and in career prep initiatives, how to get them exposure to different industries before they pursue certain majors in college. So doing work like that, was, interesting to me and connected me more to my passions. Or, at one point I worked on an independent Black film project, right? Going out we had a, terrific team of a director and producer, Black guys, had a great film that they had written, script for. And now they were going out trying to seek capital from investors to support it. And that experience sort of sparked something in my mind around capital accessibility, right? In Black spaces and with, Black entrepreneurs. And it was hard as hell to find anyone who would, really champion the project, but then be able to put money behind it, right? And then we ended up having people who loved the idea, but didn't have, the capital or the resources to do it.
Oh, wow.
So things like that, just, those type of experiences, just branching out a little bit while I was still in corporate America, I think shaped and informed sort of what I wanted to do next. Yeah. But I still had no clue. And so I had to take a step back and really think about what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I thought that B school would be the next phase that would allow me that space to do that. So that was the turning point.
Yeah. But before we even, get into B school, because that's its own chapter, right? I think you hit on something really important. The fact that you didn't really know, what the next step would be or exactly what you wanted to be doing, as you shouldn't. A lot of times, even now, we feel pressure on ourselves to just have the full picture. And like, our life is big. Our life is wide. We can't possibly have the full picture right now at this moment, which could end up being a blip in time when we look back, right? So you didn't really know, but what you did do was start pursuing all of your passions that might not seem to align or make sense or have anything to do with your career goals, but they all ended up tying back to something. Like, that was kind of your side hustle, so to speak, like starting Catalyst and doing this film project, right?
Absolutely. Getting out there, getting my feet wet, figuring out what it's about, and just learning.
Yeah.
Just learning a lot.
Yeah, because, a lot of times we don't realize what we could be doing while we're lost and confused is we just got to start figuring stuff out on our own by just putting ourselves out there and learning. And the easiest place to start is with something you like doing. Even if you can't connect the dots right now, like, start doing something that you love or that, gets you excited inside.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that. So before we actually spoke today, I got an email from a friend. She'll send me notes, from different sermons as she's doing, her Bible study, and she goes to a certain church in New Jersey, and she'll send me notes from that. And so today, when I read the notes, one thing that stood out is that the preacher had said, your passion or your purpose rather, is greater than your position. And that was really profound because, I think to your point, Nikki, is a lot of times we'll, pull our hair out about what we should be doing and where we should be in our lives. And a lot of times we're comparing ourselves to other folks, and whether it's, financially or just, what type of job we currently have, we're not quite satisfied. And so our position is something that we feel should take priority, right, in terms of how we make decisions about things. But it should be actually the reverse, where your passion and your purpose, whatever you feel that is, should take priority over the position that you have in life. And if you continue to do that, it will lead to putting you in the right position that you need to be in to make the change that you want to make. But you can't always see that, in that moment. But if you trust it enough, trust your purpose and trust that passion that you have and follow that, then it will get you to the position you want to be in.
Amen. And that just spoke a word to me. So thank you to your friend, because I did not go to church today. So that is my message for the week. Yes.
Jim, yeah.
Passion is so much greater than position. Like, because we'll get back to that. But let's talk a little bit about B School. We coincidentally started going through our pursuit of business school around the same time. We both joined Management Leadership for Tomorrow, MLT, MBA prep program, and little, did we know we would end up both going to University of Michigan Ross School, but we did. And I know my reasons for pursuing business school, but tell the audience about your reasons. Like, you'd come from Wharton, you'd worked at Citigroup. Were you not all business out yet? Like, did you not have it all at that time?
Here we go. Again, I think it really was about, B school is looked at in a certain way to most people, and it's something like that is typical, right, or traditional for folks to do once they sort of burn out from working, or they just don't know what the hell they want to get into next. For me, I looked at it as an opportunity to test things out, to try things that, I otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to do. And it wasn't about going to get, formal business education to go into a mainstream industry, right? It was about coming out of that and really finding myself, and taking 2 years to do it. If that makes sense to most people. A lot of people think, well, what about, the academic piece and et cetera? And, I have to say that did, have its place in the experience for B school. But again, for me, those 2 years were so critical for me to almost unlearn a lot of stuff that I had learned before, and to really, pick up new lessons, but less about business as taught in a classroom, curriculum style. It's more about business as it applies to me as Stefanie, as an individual, what I want and what I could bring to the world, and really knowing what that is. And that's something I had no time to do. Up to that point, I was grinding, taking on next opportunity, et cetera, finding roles that fit, where I can grow, but not really reflecting on that growth and knowing where that growth was headed. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the appealing aspect for me, just to take that time out, take a pause in life.
And, it's so funny you mentioned the unlearning, because I went into the process very much still aiming and looking for a mainstream role. My focus was on marketing, but possibly brand management. And, it's so serendipitous that we did end up there together, and also end up living together, and then, meeting our third roommate, Media, who I really think you guys changed the trajectory of my life in some senses, because it was the first time we all would sit down and have these conversations about what we wanted our life to look like post business school. And it was the first time I really started to unlearn all the definitions of what success is, especially success post MBA. Because once you get into the MBA bubble, it's all about, okay, you got to get this internship, and okay, you got to get the full-time role, and you got to go to these recruiting events, and there are only certain type of industries and companies that are recruiting. And so we all start to quickly categorize ourselves into these buckets. But you were never on that path. You had no interest in that path, right? That's when you really started to focus specifically on venture capital. So tell us about that. Like, when you first started exploring this industry, did you know much about it before you came to Ross?
I didn't know much at all. What I did know is that there were some Black folks in Silicon Valley, and they were really trying to make moves, especially on behalf of Black folks. And I was digging it. So you think about, like Angela Benton or Mike Green, who talks about the innovation economy. Angela Benton started the New Me Accelerator. I remember when I was thinking of all this, I think it had to be back in 2012. CNN had featured her on Soledad O'Brien's program at the time. I think it's called Being Black in America. And it was about, this Black woman in the Valley starting this accelerator specifically for Black tech entrepreneurs. I thought it was the coolest thing. And Google at one time had even funded her or sponsored her program to support these entrepreneurs. But long story short, pioneers like her who came out of that ecosystem, right? People who actually look like me, right? Who came from underserved community, who were in there trying to, basically tear up everything that traditional VC startup land would suggest a successful tech entrepreneur should look like. And I was just sold at that point. And then I started thinking more around, obviously it started tying back to my father and my affinity just for entrepreneurs and supporting them. But then, just thinking about on a macro level, what the intersection of, capital accessibility, minority entrepreneurship, and technology could really look like. I mean, you think about racial wealth gaps, and today where we sit, where for every $1 of white wealth, you have 6 cents on the dollar of Black wealth in comparison. Such a big difference in how technology is evolving and moving, and how it's creating huge windfalls of cash and capital in the economy on never before seen levels. Like, how could we get our folks, our people into this space to be able to build technology companies that could allow for reinvestment of capital earned from these endeavors to support the growth and elevation of Black communities? So how we bring that money back to us, back into our communities, back into our needs, and have entrepreneurs who are creating jobs, who, really care about the community because they're from the community, and just having Black folks cash out on what is such a hyper growth sector, and a sector that, by the way, because we've moved into sort of what they call, Internet 2.0, how are we getting, our communities online into the digital fold, right? Where technology is literally permeating every part of our lives. So I thought that was very, very cool. And I was like, you know what, I need to get in there. And I don't know what my role position, like, how, what my value will be to this, but it's an ecosystem that's, needs a lot of support, and I want to play a part. And so that's how I started thinking more about the capital accessibility piece around it and the venture capital side.
So you had your thoughts were starting to bubble up about this industry. You had a passion that started to grow and kind of, single out an area where you could finally make an impact or focus on the community that you wanted to impact. But you still had to get there. You were coming from a completely different background, and you knew you had to get there. So walk us through how you positioned yourself to get the experiences you needed to get into this industry of venture capital.
Yeah, it was a windy road. So first thing I will mention, looking back on, B school is one thing. The second part is like which school, which program.
Right, we completely skipped over that. That is our Ross bias, because we're just like, well, Ross is the greatest, so we don't even have to touch on that. Duh.
I honestly, when I got there, it was just love. Like, the community there at Ross was just everything I needed at the time. But the important thing around, like, intentionality, right, and what I wanted to do, and how I was thinking about venture capital. So, little fun fact that most people don't know is at the Ross School, they house the nation's first student-led social venture fund, and now, obviously there are a lot of different venture funds and social impact funds across various business school programs now, but it really was started at University of Michigan. And so for me to have opportunity to go to the school and get in on that experience, it's like a 2-year commitment, really robust program, but totally student-led, where you're learning the ins and outs of venture capitalism, you're learning ins and outs of what it means to apply that in a social impact format or framework, and you're able to just experiment, you know what I mean? And you're able to make certain decisions around investment and actually handle real money and make a huge impact on early stage companies. So that's where I got, my first real introduction into venture capital, but doing it in a way that was somewhat safe and, unconventional, and was more academic, right? Around the exercise, being able to bring different ideas, perspectives into play, but being done so in a way that's taught by a world-renowned, faculty member, right? Who's done this stuff for years. And so that was just very cool. And then just being able to take that leadership position too within that capacity to understand like how do you go about even building a fund, right? What's the infrastructure around an actual investment fund, and how do you organize for that? So it's very, very cool opportunity.
Yeah, it was really interesting that, you zeroed in on that, because that's something, and again, we had completely different career focuses, but that's something that I paid less attention to and learned more about as you did it and, grew into a leadership role with the venture fund. But even just being in the organization, like that's not enough to get you to where you are now. Like you had to take other steps. Like you made the conscious choice to forego as much income as you could have gotten during the summer with like a traditional internship.
Okay. Yeah.
To do the MBA Across America program. And then I think that is really unique. So like share a little bit about that for the people at home who have no idea what that is. And
My crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to your point, the social venture fund was one thing, right? That led me to Ross. When I got there, a whole other bucket of things opened up. And I was just on a mission to, again, and I tell people this all the time, tell a story that nobody can tell. Like do things that, people haven't done, have experiences that other people can't talk about.
And I love that so much. Tell a story that no one can tell. And you know what, too? Like, that's not even a big ask. If you just tell your story, no one else could tell that. Like, no one else has lived in your shoes.
And for my entrepreneurs out there that are listening, when you're looking at building a business and, say if it's, a cosmetics company, right? There's tons of those. And you're a little disheartened by the fact that it's a crowded space or that it seems overly competitive. And you're like, how can I differentiate myself? And I think, what you hit the nail on the head, Nikki, with is it's easy to do it, right? To tell your own story because your story is so original and it's yours. And so when you bring that to a company element, when you bring it into your business, that's what is your initial differentiator, right? Only you can execute on this vision in this way. So don't be discouraged by that because you'll always have, competition in the market, and whatever idea you're thinking of, I always say it's not novel. It's 7 billion plus people in this world. Somebody else has probably already thought of your idea, but it's about the execution of it and what you bring as an individual to that idea that makes it different.
Got it. And I kind of interrupted you, like you were about to talk about, the fact that you still had to take a lot of different moves to position yourself for the world of VC, even though you were working at the student-run venture fund, like you still had to really take strategic moves. So tell us a little bit about that, including like your internship experience.
Yeah. So I knew, look, at the end of the day, that summer between the first year at school and the second year is when you never get back again. And it is a precious summer. So for me, I really wanted to be thoughtful around how I was going to use it and to just do something that may seem very risky, but really wasn't in hindsight. Because at the end of the day, I knew that, I had a certain skill set already, right? From my previous work experience, I had a certain network. I knew certain things. I could do something. So I knew at the end of the day, even if that failed tragically, there were ways I could go back to doing things I had done before that worked and maybe doing a reset if I needed to figure out stuff. So knowing what was in my wheelhouse, what I had at risk really was, the first step. And that kind of alleviated a lot of the initial stress. The other thing is, I went in knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to get more exposure to as many entrepreneurs as possible across as many different businesses as possible, because I knew that would inform my overall thinking around entrepreneurship. The struggles around being an entrepreneur. What are their main pain points? I ran into a guy who was an entrepreneur resident at MIT during my B school journey, and one thing he told me is that you gotta, if you're gonna have credibility in the industry, if you're not sort of working in a startup, understanding end-to-end operations, at some point you have to figure out how to really, walk in the shoes of the entrepreneur and know what they're dealing with on a day-to-day and at every different life cycle of their company. And so that was really my focus. So over the summer, I was thinking about how can I get into an actual startup that's growing, that is really hunkering down with the founders, building out the operations, building out the team, understanding their market, understanding the swings and ups and downs in their market and growing as a venture. And that's what landed me, with figuring out how to get access to Nexercise, which was a startup company that I ended up working for in summer 2014. So I ended up taking on 2 internship opportunities that summer. It was with Nexercise, which is now called Swerkit. It's a fitness app company doing really well. They pivoted actually while I was working for them. But, that was the first internship that I took. And then the second was, to your point, Nikki, the MBAs Across America opportunity. So for me, coupling those things together was very important. The first one, getting exposure within a real startup, seeing, how they're managing themselves, how they're building themselves out, and then how they're handling the day-to-day around changes in the market and within the company. And then the second part was around, again, like getting exposure to so many entrepreneurs doing different things, understanding their different challenges, and being able to work with them and to support them in a certain capacity to get over those challenges. And that's where MBAs Across America played a huge role. I mean, it's such a cool opportunity to hop in a car with 3 other, smart, ambitious, passionate individuals, care about small business, take this road trip across the country, which, by the way, is incredible. It's such a beautiful topography, beautiful, just natural landscape, across the U.S. in cities and states I would never go to or venture to, like Bozeman, Montana, right? Never even knew Bozeman existed until I ended up when I did work with an entrepreneur, working with female entrepreneurs, male entrepreneurs, minority or, underserved entrepreneurs, and then some who were serial entrepreneurs who were actually motivational speakers. They'd done this stuff so long that they were actually getting paid to speak about it. So a whole breadth, and from working on a wine farm to working with a woman who manufactured pet products. Like it was such a great overall, diverse, encompassing experience for me that I had to do it. And what I myself being on the road with all those uncertainties and challenges, was just another level that I wouldn't have expected to receive when I first went in.
And how did you end up connecting with, post that experience, going back into your second year? What opportunities were you looking for, and how did you end up connecting with Keisha Cash at Impact America Fund?
Yeah, so again, when you're really focused on what you want, when you're focused on your purpose and you really feeling like you're figuring that out, it's almost like the universe just starts to connect things for you. And I jokingly say like the universe connected me and Keisha, but it really was about continuing to stay the course of what I wanted my career to look like, and that means intersecting the skill set that I had and what I was good at, right, my strengths, with my passion and purpose. So what I felt like I thought that was. And being able to continuously look at opportunities in that way would lead me to people who felt the same way about, certain things I was interested in, right? Or had maybe done some work in that space. And so I started to get further and further entrenched in a network that existed of folks who were very like-minded. And through that, I got connected to Keisha because she, during the spring semester of my second year in business school, she happened to be running this 3-month graduate fellowship program to support her fund. She had just launched the fund, it was less than a year before. She would have had come up on her first year anniversary that summer after I graduated. But in that spring, she needed some dedicated fellows who were very passionate about community, very, interested in technology intersection, and had some sort of tangible experience or expertise related to the fund or the business. And so was connected, got recommended by someone for the program, and then was able to take this 3-month graduate fellowship opportunity during the last semester of school. through that experience is really cool and unexpected. So I was supposed to do this big, landscape analysis research around big data and technology, et cetera. And then also how that's, being layered on to the social impact space, like data for good, et cetera. So I was doing that sort of landscape analysis work. But in the middle of that is when the Maven $10 million Series A opportunity came about through the fund. And this is like a live deal going on.
Give us some background on Maven for folks who don't know.
Yeah, sure. We'll definitely talk about Maven. So Maven is one of our portfolio companies at Impact America Fund, a company that is really supporting hundreds of thousands of Black hairstylists across the country by being what they call a distribution as a service company. So they provide the inventory of Black hair care products to these stylists, and then also offer them an e-commerce platform where through this platform that each of these stylists have, they can sell product, most of the product being hair extensions today, to their clients directly. And in this way, not only are they earning money as hairstylists who do the installations of the weave or the hair extensions, but they also earn income on selling the actual product, the hair extension or the wet good product that's going through the platform. And so they're able to make up to 20% more income annually by being able to have almost a retail outlet for their online store without having to incur the cost of that inventory. Because we know when we're starting up, especially a lot of times as solopreneurs, who are like one man shop for their business, we don't have a lot of capital or money to invest in inventory, et cetera, to open up a retail shop. But how can we, earn revenue off of that, even though we're working in that industry? Okay. The Black hair care industry is $9 billion, right? Or more.
And not much of it is owned by us.
It's owned by us, right? But we have so many Black women who are working in this space as service providers for the industry, and they're not getting that, a piece of that income that comes from the retail side of the distribution of the hair products. And so Maven allows these things to coexist, where they're meeting the hairstylists right where they are as the stylist for their clients, but giving them the opportunity to sell products based on those relationships that they have with their clients. So that's Maven, and they've been doing extremely well in the venture capital space as a Black-owned company.
So the deal was coming up right when you were still in B school, still just doing this initial project for Impact America?
Yes. So the opportunity came up. We were going to invest in the round. It was being led by one of the most prominent venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, Andreessen Horowitz. And we needed to put together, we had some diligence we needed to complete for the company. We had to put together an investment memo. And so I hopped right on that opportunity to lead the initiative, and my teammates who are in the graduate fellowship program to work through that, through completing research diligence and then also completing the investment memo. Investment memo is a internal document, a formal document that's used to make an investment decision on a company. So led that effort. We closed it out, and then were able to come into the round, the Series A round, as an investor. And through that action and through that work that I had done, Keisha was really upfront about, how she appreciated that work and wanted me to join her to help build our Impact America Fund after the graduate fellowship program. And so she came to me and she's basically like, Stefanie, love the work that you've been doing. Really appreciate how you just dropped everything and hopped on the transaction. We're able to get it done. And because of that, I don't know what you're doing after school in terms of career and what companies you've signed up with, or, what you're looking at, but would love if you could help me build this out. And, that's,
wow.
That's pretty incredible, especially because a couple years before that, when I learned about who she was, I said to myself, I don't know how I'm going to meet this woman, but I have to meet her because she's definitely the first Black woman, I'd seen at that time who was really raising capital on her own through investors, and then using that capital to really directly support Black communities and Black entrepreneurship in a way that I hadn't seen before. So I had already been admiring her from afar, and, you know, fortunate enough for me, by being focused on things that were authentic to myself and things I was passionate about that actually align with her passions as well, it led me to her and to the unique opportunity that it is today, Impact America Fund.
Yeah, and I never get tired of hearing that story because I'm like, that's my friend. And no, that was just, I was like, what? Steph is like, what is she doing? Like, you were just so focused, so busy during that time. But now, you know, looking back, I totally get it. So you're in this world now of Impact America. What is your role like? What is your job like? Tell us about a typical weekday. You're always on the road. Like, what kind of things are you guys up to?
We're you know, out here just really trying to get it. We're hustling. We are, you know, we're definitely focused, heads down, trying to prove this out. When we say prove it out, you know, it's basically because little known history fact. So Keisha Cash is officially, and by the way, Stanford Graduate Business School actually did a case study and a case write-up on her and Impact America Fund. So, you know, if you ever get a chance to check it out, definitely check out her story and how the fund was established.
Oh, awesome. I'll try to link to that in the show notes. So, you know, once this launches, I will add that to the show notes.
Yeah, but because of that work, she's officially the first Black woman to start a social venture impact fund. And it's pretty cool how she's been able to do a lot of this work on her own. And then me coming in, you know, as part of the team, it's very, very lean, very entrepreneurial for sure. I cover a lot of the operational components of the fund. So,
and when you say fun, because when you say fun, you know, sometimes I take for granted what I know and what I don't know because of being around you and going to B school. Like, break it down a little bit in terms of, so you have to raise money, right, to have money to give away in simple terms, right? So explain how it all works.
It's the other people's money model. Right. Yeah, and that's one thing is kind of a misconception about us. I don't think people necessarily think that like I took money out of my own bank account for the fund, but it is a notion that it is our money. When in reality, we have the decision-making power on where the money goes, but we still have responsibility to the investors or the folks who gave us the money. So it's not quite our money. What we do is we work with a couple of different groups of folks to bring investment into the fund. Those folks are either high net worth individuals. So you're talking about people who are, you know, hundreds of millions and even billions dollars net worth, who can put a couple million, you know, say, or a couple 100,000 into an organization like Impact America Fund, right? And not feel some kind of way about like it's very little money to them, and based on what they're putting in and what their net worth is. So you have to have these like ultra high net worth individuals who can take that risk, right? And it'll represent like between 2 to say 5% of their portfolio of investments. So whatever they're investing their money in totally, only a very, very small portion of that would they dedicate to something like Impact America Fund. So that's one group. Another group is more institutional folks. So if you think about certain financial services companies, you know, that have billions of dollars, obviously, like they can put money into our fund, or foundations even, you know, that manage these huge multi-billion-dollar endowments. A lot of them, you know, will manage for universities and other, you know, institutions. And so they'll have a lot of money that they have to put in different financial instruments, right, to make a return on that money. And again, a very small portion. So they'll put in like stocks and bonds and different things like that. But then they'll also put a very, very small portion into things like Impact America Fund. And the reason why it's such a small percentage is because for venture capital, very high risk investment activity, right? But and that's why the goal is to have a pool of money, which, you pool this money from a bunch of different investors, as I had explained. That money is then deployed to early stage companies based on certain criteria that the fund has established for how they want to invest the money. And that's important because you want to be aligned with your investors, right, as a fund. So the folks who are investing in you, that we call limited partners, they, again, want to understand, even though we have as asset managers, the final decision-making power on how the money is deployed or invested in companies, we still have to report this information back to our limited partners. So that's why it's important for us to establish what we call a thesis around how we invest or the types of companies that we want to invest in. So that's how, a fund is set up and sort of what its purpose is. And the thing is, it wants to take all this money that it's been able to raise through its limited partners and then put it into as many companies as possible and as quickly that align with whatever that investment criteria that was established. And the idea is that if you do this, at least one or two of those companies out of that portfolio, you can think about 10 to 12 companies total in a portfolio. Some companies, some funds that have bigger portfolios, obviously it gives them a higher probability, right, to meet those returns. But you want to hit on at least one or two companies that can return the full money of the fund. So that company will go from being a couple $1 million worth in its value to, say, a couple billion worth in value. And if that happens, then obviously you get a huge upside on your investment, and that money is then returned back to the limited partners who initially invested. So that's the whole purpose of venture capital. And through that upside, a small percentage of that goes out as payment or compensation to the asset manager, along with their ongoing management fee that they take.
And then that's how you get paid too.
That's how I get paid. Yes, yeah. How we get paid.
Mm-hmm. So what's a day in the life like when, what's the percentage of time you're raising more funds and the percentage of time you are deploying?
So fundraising for the fund can, it really depends. It could take from 6 months to, a year and a half, or, sometimes even 2 years, depending on the asset manager's decision and the partner's decision around who they want to take money from, how long that's going to take, how big, the fund is going to be. And when you're a first-time fund like Impact America Fund, meaning we haven't done it before this way, this is our first time going out doing this. Usually it takes longer, right? Because you have to build those relationships. You have to court those investors. People want to see a track record. They want to see that you know what you're doing with their money. So it could take some time, but you take whatever that time is, you set a limit legally, and you stick to that limit, whatever that is. And then once you're done, once that time expires, whatever you've raised, you then use to deploy. So for a fund, usually their life cycle is 10 years. The first 5 years is open to the fund actually going out and investing in companies. And a fund doesn't have to spend those full 5 years investing, right? They can spend the first 2 years doing it, and then, that's it. They'll just let the investments earn value. But they have up until 5 years. It's standard for them to be able to take up to 5 years, depending on what they're investing in, what their targets are. But then after that 5 years, then the object is for the second 5 years for them to let those companies grow in value. And so that's where the portfolio management piece of the job comes into play. And then in the middle of that, they can actually start working on a second fund. And so usually a venture capital organization will go through 3 fund cycles. They'll start their first fund. They'll invest, all the capital for that particular fund into those portfolio companies, let those vest. As that's happening, they'll start raising money for their second one, and then they'll do that again for their third. And the objective is that as, companies from the first fund mature, they start returning a certain investment, and it's like a staggered return that happens over several years.
And what about the entrepreneurs during this process? So talk to me about when you're going out there and talking to the entrepreneurs, where do you find small businesses that you're interested in? Are you only looking for small businesses, or it can be different types of ventures as long as their mission aligns with Impact America's?
Yeah, we're looking for entrepreneurs that are building businesses that are tech enabled or tech based for profit companies operating within $1 billion+ markets, right? So we're hoping that they'll hit on something within a big market opportunity. That way, it can, as their business scales and is successful, the impact of that scales as well. And so we look for companies that are really, they're for profit based, but the social impact piece is inherent in that model. So if you think about Maven again, it's a for-profit business where they're able to earn revenue based on how much, hair product is sold through their e-commerce platform, right? But the products are sold through hairstylists that are typically making between, and we did surveys on these stylists on the platform, making between $18,000 to $24,000 in annual income, right? That's very, very, low income for somebody to support themselves. But because we're able to support this low to moderate income group of folks, because they get commission on everything that they sell, as Maven earns revenue through the product, so do the hairstylist. And so that's where we identify that impact, where it's very organic, it's very much tied to the success of the business. So, that's an example of type of companies that we look at. Usually they've already raised some money already. They already have gone through some sort of formal accelerator program or something to really prove out their model. They have traction, they have customers. Usually they're making some revenue, but they just need operational fine tuning. A lot of times, the entrepreneurs has gone from just being very much heads down and very startup entrepreneur, but needs to really prepare him or herself in a professional development capacity to really be the CEO, head of a multi-million-dollar company. And so, helping them position for that type of growth, but then also getting them connected to more traditional venture capital firms that wouldn't necessarily take a chance on them early on just because they don't understand the business model. So we serve as translators of that, helping them get to that next big level. And usually we call that between 12 and 18 months away from a Series A type of financing.
Got it. And so if I'm an entrepreneur or a business owner who wants to get on your radar, where should I be right now? Where are you looking for me so I can make sure I'm there?
Well, I will say the easiest way is to go to our website, and we have information online for our entrepreneurs so they can understand what we're looking for. But then also we have a submission form where we have them complete it so we can understand their business, where they are, who they are. You can go right there, directly fill that out, and it'll come right to us. And
that's impactamericafund.com.
Yes, that's impactamericafund.com. Go there. I'm sure, Nikki, you'll share it on your website as well. But you go there. That's the first easiest way to get in touch with us. And for most venture capital firms, they don't respond to everyone. We respond to each and every submission that we get. So that's our promise to you.
Oh, nice. And what are some common misconceptions about what you do and how this whole process works?
Yeah. So you mean, what do I do in terms of screening opportunities, or as what my day-to-day looks like? 'Cause I know we didn't even talk about it.
Yeah, I know, right? We'll get back to that. So much to say, but it's okay. I think that there's some missteps that you probably see a lot of people of color, making, because we just don't know much about the process. And I think you can help to clarify what the purpose of VC is, and the fact that not every business needs to raise capital. I've seen you share that a lot in your talks. Why do you feel that way?
Venture capital is very specific, is a very specific type of capital. It really traditionally is around supporting companies within high growth or what they call hyper growth sectors. So, a lot of high tech or, tech based type of business models within, but not just, tech based, but it has to also be operating within a big enough market, right? So, again, if I go back to the Maven example, they're working in a $9 billion market. If they were working in a $9 million market, it wouldn't be as interesting, right? Because the point is, again, it's very high risk. And so you have to hit on opportunities that could yield a high return. So that's venture capital specifically. It's a space where we felt like we could make the impact that we thought is needed in underserved communities based on where technology is today. But we know that that's not the only role to play, right? We know there's so much that needs to happen for our communities to really uplift us, especially supporting our entrepreneurs. And we know that not all Black entrepreneurs are going to be working in this space, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to think about where you are in terms of your business, what type of industry you're in, what type of pain point or need you're solving for, and how you're going about doing it. Is it a brick and mortar business? Is it a business that has a technology component to it? Is it a lifestyle type of business, right? And all of those are okay. Another thing you think about is what stage you're in. Are you at, just sort of of conceiving the idea, like you have a business plan, but you haven't put anything together yet to really start building on it? Or are you in the build stage, but you're still trying to figure out what the final product's going to look like or what the final service is going to look like by testing it out with customers? Or, have you already tested out with customers? You got traction, you got revenue. You just need additional money to build out your team, right? So you can expand and what you're doing works very well in New York City, but maybe you want to try it in Boston, right? And see what that looks like. And so you need additional money to get there and to replicate that model. So figuring out what stage you're at is also very important. And then the other thing is figuring out how big you want your company to be. Like, you don't have to build this crazy, like I said, multi-billion-dollar company. Again, in VC land, it's important because we want to make sure the investors were able to get a return that's enough to pay back, our initial investors of the fund. But at the end of the day, every business, doesn't aspire to do that. And every entrepreneur is not built to do that. And so being very honest about how big you want your company to be and what that entails for you as the founder, your ability to do it, but also your will to do it. If you have other things going on or you want to live a certain lifestyle, by all means do that. That is your right. That's your God-given right. But be clear about it early on and figure out what that big vision really looks like for you. And once you take that step, then you can break down, okay, what do I need to do at each phase to get to that bigger vision? And how much money and resources is that going to take me for at each of those steps? And that's how you'll really start to figure out what the money gaps are. And from there, you'll get a better understanding of, who are the money resources out there. You can think about public sector grants, done through organizations like the SBA, Small Business Administration, low interest debt financing that can come out of those type of agencies, or, working with a local community bank. Doesn't have to be, Wells Fargo, doesn't have to be a Citigroup. It could be a Black owned bank. If there's one in your town, a lot of these are very community oriented. How can you get a loan from some of them? Some of it is just bootstrapping. If you're able to save up some funds, and even, God forbid, you have to leverage a credit line, high interest credit line, but thinking through the different things and what you can afford and what you can't afford and what you have access to and don't is going to be very important.
Yeah, I think that's all really sound advice that people don't always know. There's certain models of raising money or getting support for your business that are more prominent and more talked about than others. And so we just really need to be able to think outside of the box and make sure we know that we're doing what's best for our particular business and industry. So finally,
but Nikki,
yeah,
I was about to say just a couple of things about the funding piece.
Yeah,
I just think are really important. One is that it's not a silver bullet for everything. So even if you get it, it's not going to solve your problems. You at the end of the day have to be very good at being a steward of that money, knowing how much to spend, where to spend it, and how much of the yields that you want to see come out of that spend. So just being thoughtful around that piece. It's not the end all be all.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I did forget to really touch on the fact that, getting money actually comes with a lot more pressure. So you are no longer like just in this on your own. You have people are now holding you accountable for making certain gains with your business. So talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, not all money is good money, and you could be in a position where maybe you're very attractive in the market. You have the right, risk profile, and you have folks coming at you who want to cut you these big checks, but that doesn't mean you should take all of them, right? Like, love quote in future, but he said, you do what you want when you pop. And so if your head's down and your business is growing and doing its thing and you're successful and you're earning revenue, you're going to have all kinds of folks coming after you with capital, with bank loans, with, working capital, credit lines, even maybe venture capital money, even private investors, right? People want to get in on the action, but you gotta, remember that you, at the end of the day, have the power and the choice around what money you want to take and what you don't. And again, what type of relationships you want to tie yourself to with that money. So making sure you understand what people's intentions are around cutting you a check, right? Like, is it really just about the returns, or is it really about the work that you're doing and the impact you're making in your community? And if you're aligned with that person on their or that institution with your values, et cetera, and your bigger vision for the company too, then that's great. But if you're not, then that's a red flag. And so that money may not be worth it at the end of the day. It may look good today, but down the line, it may be way more than you bargained for. So being really thoughtful about that.
You're so right. And finally, what parting advice do you have for women side hustlers who, dream of one day working for themselves but don't know where to start?
There's always somewhere you can start, even if it's something very small, like just putting your idea on paper. So, always think about how you can take advantage of today, based on where you are, what you have access to, who you have access to. Even if it's just a conversation with somebody, like reaching out saying, hey, I'm thinking of this business idea, just want to brainstorm with you around it, or want to just get your opinion about it as a potential customer, somebody who could be interested in it, like give me feedback, right? So there's always something you can do, even if it's not the thing that you initially had your mind set on. That one thing may take you 6 months where you thought it could take you 3, right? But there's something that'll take you, 3 days to get done. And that may be something that you can just go ahead and start working on and chipping away at. So don't ever feel like, there isn't something that you can do, or there's something else that you have to do that's hindering these other things to grow. I also think that we got to stop worrying about what people think. We all have, issues around confidence and self-esteem. I know I do. Like, I was even jittery for this podcast. Out there.
I'm jittery to release it, but we're just going to keep on moving.
And we got to keep sharing that, Nikki, because I think you have to remind people that all of us, even when we seemingly look like we got our shit together, we're nervous on the inside. We don't know. I don't know if the information I'm sharing with you guys is going to be helpful. I hope it is, right? Or you might say, I don't think she was that helpful to me. But, at the end of the day, you got to just put yourself out there, because if you don't, you'll regret it. Somebody else will, right? And then they'll do their thing, and you're like, man, I wish, I could have done it better, or I wish I really had the courage to take that leap. Or if it's just really an issue you're passionate about, why not you? Why not you be the person to solve for it? And even if you fail, which is also a very beautiful thing, because you learn so much, and for the next endeavor, you can take those learnings and kill it, right? Yeah. But even if you fail, you'll be surprised that, like, within that failure, like, how much you're inspiring people. And so just thinking about the fact that and I think we mentioned this at the Blavity conference, but it's so much bigger than you. And for us as African-American women, it is so much bigger than us. It always is, right? We're always doing it for ourselves, but we're also doing it for our people. And so I would just encourage folks to always, keep that in the forefront of their minds when they're scared or they're unsure. And then also just connect with people who are ahead of you, right? Who've been where you're going. you don't want to have to make mistakes. If you don't have to, like some of them are great for learning, but others you can clearly avoid, right? Especially if they're very expensive and someone else has already figured it out, right? The best practice of it. Like, who is that person that you aspire to be in a couple of years, or who just seem like they got it together and they figured something out that you need some information around. Like, really tap into those folks and see what your future could look like, right? Like, have that magnetism with another individual to help pull you forward and push you forward. I think we work in silos too often. We don't collaborate enough. Nikki, we always talk about this, gotta find your tribe, gotta find your people, gotta find your girls, or whomever who's going to support you now and help elevate you throughout.
And I'm so glad we're ending on this note, because I love that. It's like the one thing that I always try to make myself transparent, even when I'm posting on Instagram and people hit me up and they're so inspired by me. And it's like, I'm scared. Like, most times before I write something, I have to push through the like, oh my gosh, what if, I work a full-time job. Like, what if my employer sees this and they, think something about it and blah, blah, blah. So I like to keep that in mind too, that it's so much bigger than me. Like, there's someone else out there who is maybe 2 years from where I am now. So, sometimes I also think about like, who am I? Like, I'm still learning. Who am I to like try to coin myself as this expert who can teach someone else something else? Because, 30s sneak up on you. Like, I still feel like I'm in college sometimes. So I'm like, oh, who am I? But there's someone who actually is still in college or just got out of college who's where I was 10 years ago, who needs to hear my story. So I keep that in mind, that it's bigger than me and my insecurities and my nervousness. And then finally, rejection is absolutely redirection, as Oprah says. So if this fails, like, who cares? Like, I'll learn, like, okay, maybe I'm not a podcaster. We'll move right along to the next thing that it will probably get me closer to, because I failed at this. And a note too on like learning from others. Definitely, I feel like if someone hasn't done exactly what you've done, they've done a variation of it. For example, with podcasting, like, there's so much information once you Google how to podcast to actually teach you. Like, people are like, oh my God, you're starting a podcast. And it's actually like anyone could do it. Just Google it. So I would absolutely encourage everybody to go after their passion. So on that note, thank you so much, Steph, for being a guest on the Side Hustle Pro podcast. I'm honored to have you on, and I can't wait for everyone to hear this. And finally, just how do people follow you or get in touch post listening to this interview?
Yeah, so again, you can find us on our website. It's called impactamericafund.com. So you can find us there. And Nikki, I believe that you'll share that information.
Yes.
I'm also on Twitter. You can tweet me, direct message me at Technically Speaking. So it's TECHNLY_SPEAKN.
All right. Thank you so much, Steph. Hey guys, thanks for listening to Side Hustle Pro. If you want to hear more from me, head on over to sidehustlepro.co/Side Hustle Corner to get my weekly Side Hustle Diaries chronicles about my own journey from passion project to profitable business. And if you want to find me online, I'm at Side Hustle Pro on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Don't forget to join the Side Hustle Pro Facebook community. Go to sidehustlepro.co/mastermind. And as always, if you love the show, do me a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks, guys. Talk to you next week.